So Gary, another thing you said that I really agreed with was basically that the way we think changes our perception, or in other words, the way we experience the world. And so a few new ideas can change the world, and I really agree with that. And I know you hate it. It seems when I talk about the specific philosophers that I've read and that I like, because it sounds like convoluted bullshit and just a bunch of big words that don't really amount to anything. But I think the purpose of these big words is to try to describe a new way of thinking, a new perception of the world, so that we can change the world. Because this is, I mean, every one of my philosophy videos is all about this, the idea that we can no longer talk about finding the truth about the world. Because nouns and things, discrete entities, those don't really exist anymore. In the new way that science is coming to understand and measure the world, it realizes that its measurements are sort of like a grid or a net that it throws over reality. And that reality itself is more like an ongoing evolutionary process that's never stable enough for us to say this is what it is, or for us to separate that from this, because there's too many relationships. And the most important or the most significant or the most dynamic relationship is the one between the mind and the body, or between spirit and matter, between life and death, or order and disorder, which really order and disorder are kind of the real thing. Order and disorder are both contained within chaos. Gary, you say a lot that nature is chaos, and you know, by what you mean by that word, or what I interpret your meaning to be, or the way that you're using the word, I disagree with you. Even though the way I like to use chaos is the real process of order and disorder. Because in reality, we never find order by itself or disorder by itself. Order and disorder are a process that work together, which is chaos. And there's a whole science of chaos. If chaos was chaos, you couldn't have a science of it, right? So there's definitely order to the mayhem, and nature is chaotic, sure, but from that great chaos comes tremendous order and intelligence. Chaos is the most intelligent process the universe has been able to devise in all its evolutionary history. So we shouldn't underestimate it. And so, for example, someone like Whitehead wanted to move philosophy from trying to search for essences, isnesses, or nouns for discrete things, to looking at the processes involved in nature. And so the basic unit of existence then becomes an event. So, there's an event happening right now, and it's a transaction between, this is John Dewey's word, between my mind and my body and the world. Um, it's not an interaction. I think I've used those words a little too freely. An interaction would be, there's the mind here and it hands some information to the world here, like I touch the screen, and then the screen responds and puts some inputs into my senses, and then I process that. It makes it sound like the world and the mind are these separate things. So it's not an interaction, it's a transaction, where it's constantly being transferred in this loop-like fashion, and there's never a stable point of arrival or departure. So there's no mind where there's this processing going on in this programming. I mean, if there's really all this neuroplasticity happening in here, then the program can never be defined. You can never have a printout of what program's in the brain and say, this is what this person is because of their past. See, the past, the habits are there, and they're very real and significant, and they do, in some sense, shape the direction that the organism can move. But novelty is still going on here, and the brain is in an inherent state of chaos, naturally, which again is a relationship between order and disorder. The order is probably more like habit in the past, and the disorder is probably more like novelty, because novelty as the habits build up, they get more and more complex, and then bugs start to develop, and there's mutations. But some mutations maybe shift the habits into this new relationship with each other, so that this emergent property comes onto the scene that transcends the former activities while still being, in some sense, directed by them and formed by them. The novel emergence is somehow more all-encompassing, more complex. So the point is, the mind is always outside of itself. Most of the processing that we suppose goes on in here is really going on everywhere. It's going on out in the world. How much processing do you think writing this stuff down? Like when I'm watching a video and I happen to take notes, I'm processing information on a page with ink and the movements, the motor control of my arm and my fingers. That's a form of processing. If it wasn't, why do I need to do it? Why do I need to write the notes down if I can just process it up here? And, you know, this seems like, okay, this is an extra layer of memory maybe, and I could remember it up here, but I do an extra layer just for recall purposes. But, you know, that's true, but then language itself, when we learn to speak a language, we learn to think a language too, silently to ourselves. That silent language, the thinking that goes on in here, is never really private, because we do it, we think to ourselves, we talk to ourselves in the same language that we speak to others with. And maybe we talk to ourselves a little more openly than we talk to others. But that private talking is a private public talking. It's the unconscious, and it's still, you know, the archetypes are still a form of language. They're symbols. The noumena themselves, or the named archetype, the thing that it actually is, that we can never know, is not ever contained by the symbol or the archetype that we actually know about, the idea, the form, the component of intelligent thought, of language. It's never the thing itself. It's a name for the thing. And we're always doing this processing with letters and words in our brains. So we're always using this external apparatus, this artifact, to think with. It's not us who's doing the thinking. The thinking is happening everywhere. It's a relationship. So if the mind and body are really one ongoing relationship, an event whose locus of control is not in one pole or the other, but they're both dependent on one another to be what they are, then knowledge, which is the mind, and action, which is the body, are also not separate. Knowledge and action are this ongoing intelligent process. But when we look at it that way, intelligence is no longer like logic. And I already said this. Logic is static, and there's one rational way to be logical, because the rules of logic have been defined. And you can't break those definitions. And that does not line up with the world and with reality as we experience it. That is an abstraction. It's an obsession with abstraction. And if we reduce everything to logic, we're no longer dealing with reality itself, the full objective reality. We're dealing only with the logos, with what can be voiced and rationally thought and symbolically expressed in a language. And the real units of reality are not words and letters. So we can't rely on logic. And there's a difference between logic and intelligence. Intelligence is the ongoing process. It can never arrive at any final definitions. And logic are those final definitions. And we can still use them, but let's use them in a purely nominal way, in a way that we know we're only dealing with grammar and not with the world itself, which is really a series of events and not a collection of objects.